when loyalty is broken, that it doesn't disrupt too many other areas of your life. But it depends also on who's disrupting that loyalty. If it's a coworker versus a romantic partner versus your exclusive romantic partner, depending on the structure of your romantic partner life, I have always experienced extreme joy and feelings of safety and trust in my friendships. Again, mostly male friendships, but female friendships too, which is only to say that they were mostly male friendships. The female friendships have also been very loyal. So getting backstabbed is not something I'm familiar with. And yeah, I love being crewed up. One way to destroy your life is to spend time trying to control your or somebody else's past. So much of our destructive behavior and thinking comes from wanting something that we saw or did or heard to not be true, rather than really working with that and getting close to what it really was. And sometimes those things are even traumatic, and we need to really get close to them and for them to move through us. And that, there are a bunch of different ways to do that with support from others and hopefully, but sometimes on our own as well. I don't think we can rewire our deep preferences and what we find despicable or joyful. I do think that it's really a question of what allows us peace. Like, can you be at peace with the fact that you're very self-critical and enjoy that, get some distance from it, have a sense of humor about it? Mm-hmm. Or is it driving you in a way that's keeping you awake at night and forcing you back to the table to do work in a way that feels self-flagellating and doesn't feel good? Can you get that humility and awareness of how of your one's flaws? And I think that can create, this word space sounds very new agey, like get space from it. Is that, you can have a sense of humor about how neurotic we can all be. I mean, neurotic isn't actually a bad term in the classic sense of the psychologists and psychiatrists. The Freudians said that, the best case is to be neurotic, to actually see one's own issues and work with them. Whereas psychotic is the other, is the other way to be, which is obviously not good. So I think the question of whether or not to work on something or to just accept it as part of ourselves, I think really depends if we feel like it's holding us back or not. I think you're asking perhaps the most profound question about being a human, which is, what do you do with your body? What do you do with your mind? I mean, it's also a question, we started off talking about fitness a little bit, which is for whatever reason, do I need to run an ultra marathon? I don't feel like I need to. Goggins does and does a whole lot more than that. So that for him, that's important. For me, it's not important to do that. I don't think he does it just so he can run the ultras. There's clearly something else in there for him, and guys like Cam Hanes and tremendous respect for what they do and how they do it. Does one need to make their body more muscular, stronger, more endurance, more flexibility? Do you need to read harder books? I think doing hard things feels good. I know it feels good. I know that the worst way to feel is when I'm procrastinating and I don't do something. And then whenever I do something and I complete it and I break through that point where it was hard and then I'm doing it, at the end, I actually feel like I was infused with some sort of super chemical. And who knows if it's probably a cocktail of endogenously made chemicals. But I think it is good to do hard things, but you have to be careful not to destroy your body, your mind in the process. And I think it's about whether or not you can achieve peace. Can you sleep well at night? Stress isn't bad if you can sleep well at night. You can be stressed all day, go, 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 go. And it'll optimize your focus, but can you fall asleep and stay deeply asleep at night? Being in a hard relationship, some people say, that's not good. Other people like it. Can you be at peace in that? And I think we all have different RPM. We all kind of idle at different RPM. And some people are big mellow Costellos and others are kind of like need more friction in order to feel at peace. But I think ultimately what we want is to feel at peace. There's this beautiful... as I mentioned, it seems like every podcast lately, I'm a huge Rancid fan, mostly because I just think Tim Armstrong's writing is pure poetry, and whether or not you like the music or not, and he's written on music for a lot of other people too. He's doesn't advertise that much because he's humble, but I haven't had many betrayals in life. I've had a few, but just thinking or seeing something or learning something about something, you can't believe it. I mentioned that lyric off that first song, Indestructible, on that album, because it's just the raw emotion of I can't believe this. What I just saw is so disturbing, but I have to just keep going forward. There are certain things that we really do need to push, not just into our periphery, but off into the gutter and keep going. And that's a hard thing to learn how to do. But if you're going to be functional in life, you have to. And actually, just to get at this issue of do I change or do I embrace this aspect of self? About 6 months, it was April of this last year, I did some intense work around some things that were really challenging to me. And I did it alone, and it may have involved some medicine. And I expected to get peace through this. I was like, I'm going to let go of it. And I spent 11 hours just getting more and more frustrated and angry about this thing that I was trying to resolve. And I was so unbelievably disappointed that I couldn't get that relief. And I was like, what is this? Like, this is not how this is supposed to work. I'm supposed to feel peace. The clouds are supposed to lift. And so a week went by, and then another half week went by. And then someone whose opinion I trust very much, I explained this to them because I was getting a little concerned, like, what's going on? This is worse, not better. And they said, this is very simple. You have a giant blind spot, which is your sense of justice, Andrew, and your sense of anger are linked like an iron rod, and you need to relax. And as they said that, I felt the anger dissipate. And so there was something that I think it is true. I have a very strong sense of justice, and my sense of anger, then at least, was very strongly linked to it. So it's great to have a sense of justice, right? I hate to see people wronged. I absolutely do. And I'm human. I'm sure I've wronged people in my life. I know I have. They've told me. I've tried to apologize and reconcile where possible. Still have a lot of work to do. But where I see injustice, it draws in my sense of anger in a way that I think is just eating me up. But it was only in hearing that link that I wasn't aware of before. It was in my subconscious, obviously. Did I feel the relaxation? There's no amount of plant medicine or MDMA or any kind of chemical you can take that's naturally just going to dissipate what's hard for oneself. It needs, if one embraces that, or if one chooses to do it through just talk therapy or journaling or friends or introspection or all of the above, there needs to be an awareness of the things that we're just not aware of. So I think the answer to your question, do you embrace or do you fight these aspects of self, is I think you get in your subconscious through good work with somebody skilled, and sometimes that involves the tools I just mentioned in various combinations, and you figure it out. You figure out if it's serving you. Obviously, it was not bringing me peace. It was undermining my sense of justice, was undermining my sense of peace. And so in understanding this link, now I would say that in understanding this link between justice and anger, now I think it's a little bit more of like, it's not like a Twizzler stick, Bendy, but at least it's not like an iron rod. Like, when I see somebody wronged, I mean, it used to just like immediately. I just sit here laughing. Exactly. That's the lyric. I can't believe it. So I just sit here laughing, like can't get distracted. Just at some point. But the problem, I think, in just laughing at something like that gives you distance. But the question is, do you stop engaging with it at that point? Like I experienced this recently. I got to see how sometimes I'll see something that's just like, what? Like this is crazy. So I just laugh, but then I continue to engage in it and it's taking me off course. And so there is a place where I realize this is probably a kid's show too. So I want to keep it, G rated, but at some point for certain things, it makes sense to go, fuck that. So the question is, do you get stuck or do you move on? When you spar with somebody, even if they hurt you, especially if they hurt you, you see that person afterwards and there's an intimacy, right? It was in that book Fighter's Heart where he explains, you're exchanging bodily fluids with a stranger, right? And you're in your primitive mind. And so there's an intimacy there that persists. So I've certainly made some mistakes. I've also made some good choices in this realm. First of all, we have to define what sort of relationship we're talking about. If one is looking for a life partner, potentially somebody to establish family with or without kids, with or without pets, right? Families can take different forms. I mean, I certainly experienced being a family in a prior relationship where it was the two of us and our two dogs, and it was family. Like we had our little family. I think based on my experience and based on input from friends who themselves have very successful relationships, I must say I've got friends who are in long-term, monogamous, very happy relationships where there seems to be a lot of love, a lot of laughter, a lot of challenge, and a lot of growth. And both people, it seems, really want to be there and enjoy being there. I think one of the things that rings true over and over again in the advice and in my experience is find someone who's really a great friend. Like build a really great friendship with that person. Now, obviously not just a friend if we're talking romantic relationship, and of course, sex is super important, but it should be part of that particular relationship alongside or meshed with the friendship. Can it be a majority of the positive exchange? I suppose it could, but I think the friendship piece is extremely important because what's required in a successful relationship clearly is joy in being together, trust, a desire to share experience, both mundane and more adventurous, support each other, acceptance, a real, maybe even admiration, but certainly delight in being with the person. Earlier we were talking about peace. And I think that that sense of peace comes from knowing that the person you're in friendship with, or that you're in romantic relationship, or ideally both, because let's assume the best romantic relationship includes a friendship component with that person. It's like you just really delight in their presence, even if it's a quiet presence, and you delight in seeing them delight in things, right? That's clear. The trust piece is huge. And that's where people start, we don't want to focus on what works, not what doesn't work, but that's where I think people start engaging these covert contracts. They're afraid of being betrayed, so they betray. They're afraid of giving up too much vulnerability, so they hide their vulnerability. Or in the worst cases, they feign vulnerability. Again, that's a covert contract that just simply undermines everything. It becomes 1 + 1 = 2 - 1 to infinity. Conversely, I think if people can have really hard conversations, this is something I've had to work really hard on in recent years and that I'm still working hard on. But the friendship piece seems to be the thing that rises to the top when I talk to friends who are in these great relationships. It's like they have so much respect and love and joy in being with their friend. It's the person that they want to spend as much of their non-working, non-platonic friendship time with, and the person that they want to experience things with and share things with. And it sounds so kind of canned and cliche nowadays, but I think if you step back and examine how most people go about finding a relationship, so like, am I attracted? Of course, physical attraction is important, and other forms of attraction too. And they sort of enter through that portal, which makes sense. That's the mating dance, right? That's the peacock situation. That's hopefully not the cuttlefish situation. But I think that there seems to be a history of people close to me getting into great relationships where they were friends for a while first, or maybe didn't sleep together right away, that they actually intentionally deferred on that. This has not been my habit or my experience. I've gone the more, I think, typical, like, there's an attraction, like this person, there's an interest. You kind of explore all dimensions of relationship really quickly, except perhaps the moving in part and the having kids part, which ideally, because it's a bigger step, harder to undo without more severe consequences. But I think the whole take it slow thing, I don't think is about getting to know someone slowly. I think it's about that physical piece, because that does change the nature of the relationship. And I think it's because it gets right into the more hardwired primitive circuitry around our feelings of safety, vulnerability. There's something about romantic and sexual interactions where it's almost like it's like assets and liabilities, where people are trying to figure out how much to engage their time and their energy and multiple people. I'm talking about from both sides, male, female, or whatever sides, but where it's like assets and liabilities. And that's where it starts getting into those complicated contracts early on, I think. And so maybe that's why if a really great friendship and admiration is established first, even if people are romantically and sexually attracted to one another, then that piece can be added in a little bit later in a way that really kind of just seals up the whole thing. And then who knows, maybe they spend 90% of their time having sex. I don't know. That's not for me to say or decide, obviously. But there's something there about staying out of a certain amount of risk of having to engage covert contract in order to protect oneself. There is no rule that says that you have to be attracted to all attractive people by any means. It's very important to develop a sense of taste in romantic attractions, I believe. What you really like in terms of a certain style, a certain way of being. And of course that includes sexuality and sex itself, the verb. But I think it also includes there's just general way of being, and when you really adore somebody, you like the way they answer the phone. And when they don't answer the phone that way, something's off and you want to know. And so I think that the more you can tune up your powers of observation, not looking for things that you like, and the more that stuff just kind of washes over you, the more likely you are to quote unquote fall in love. As a mutual friend of ours said to me, listen, when it comes to romantic relationships, if it's not 100% in you, it ain't happening. And I've never seen a violation of that statement where it's like, it's mostly good and they're this and this, like the negotiations. Well, already it's doomed. And that doesn't mean someone has to be perfect. The relationship has to be perfect, but it's got to feel 100% inside. Yeah. Like yes, and yes.